What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Diesel Creek. My name's Matt. Well, it finally happened. Got the old Fiat Alice 645B wheel loader hauled into the farm. Now, it was all kind of a last-minute hurried operation.
Matt Stetar once watched his favorite machine break apart after weeks of work. It wasn't just metal, it was time, hope, and a dream crashing down. He didn't build Diesel Creek for likes. He built it to survive muddy fields and long, cold days. Every fix was a fight, every project a risk he took alone. Let us show the moment he pulled a dead machine from the swamp and made it breathe again. The man with a camera, a crane, and a dream. Matt Stetar's world wasn't a spotless garage. It was scrapyards and job sites where rust flakes feel like confetti and steel beams groaned like dinosaurs. He wasn't tuning engines in a climate-controlled shop. He was knee-deep in mud, yanking broken axles out of vintage excavators that hadn't moved in 30 years. No script, no makeup. Just a man with calloused hands and a stubborn streak longer than a haul road. But there's one machine that nearly broke him, and that's what made it click. The first few videos weren't polished. They weren't even planned. They were raw, just Matt, a camera, and a project that could either come together or blow up in his face. He didn't pretend to know everything. He just showed up, hit record, and got to work. But success is never just grease and gear oil.
So that's something I would like to fix. Of course, we'll go through our air filter, change all our oils. We'll look at a battery box cover, maybe make one of those or something. Exhaust, we're going to replace this elbow, but the rest of the exhaust looks pretty good. Stack, the bracket that holds it on there is bent, as well as the top of the stack, so we'll get a new piece for that.
Something else started to build beneath the surface. A quiet current that pulled him forward and pulled at him from behind. Before Diesel Creek became a phenomenon, Matt's life was scattered across job sites, equipment yards, and the thin margins of construction work. His business wasn't about content, it was about survival. Every broken track link was a paycheck delayed. Every seized hydraulic line meant another all-nighter. That's the part most viewers never saw. The cold days when the machine wouldn't start, the bills piling up, the phone calls no one wants to make. And then, somewhere along the way, the camera became more than just a sidekick. It started with a tractor. Not the kind you'd see at a farm museum. This one was bent, beat to hell, and parked in a swampy corner of a Pennsylvania field like it had crawled there to die. Matt didn't flinch. He rolled up in a pickup, yanked off the tarp, and went to war with rust, grease, and gravity. It wasn't pretty, but when that engine coughed back to life and the machine rolled forward, something clicked. Not just in the tractor, but in the audience. The views rolled in, the subscribers followed.
But here we are, a few months later, and of course, like every flat surface I own, it's turned into a collection place of junk and stuff that I don't have an exact spot for, so it just gets stuck somewhere.
Suddenly, the guy who fixed things for a living was getting recognized at gas stations and welding supply stores. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a character, a voice, a presence in a growing digital world where people craved real work, real struggle, and real machines. But real life doesn't pause for the algorithm. The thing about building a name online is that people think they know you. They think they understand your life because they've watched you weld a broken backhoe at midnight. But they don't see the parts you don't upload. The doubt, the exhaustion, the burnout that creeps in when you're always on. Matt wasn't acting. That was the problem. He was just being himself. And sometimes even that gets questioned. Some viewers started picking apart the details. Why didn't he fix that bracket the other way? Why not use a new part instead of salvaging an old one? Why not film it differently? Talk more, talk less, more drone shots, less drone shots. Everyone had an opinion and they all showed up in the comments. But Matt didn't change. He kept it real, grimy, stubborn, and honest. He wasn't making content. He was working. And if people wanted to watch, they could. If not, he'd still be out there, crawling under an excavator with a busted track and a torch in hand. And yet things kept growing. More views meant more revenue. More projects meant bigger risks. What started as a one-man operation began to sprawl. He needed space, more land, more storage, more room for the parts, the equipment, the dreams that were quickly outgrowing the tiny patch of gravel he started with. So he bought land, not just a backyard plot, but acres, hills, wooded stretches where he could build, expand, and finally breathe. Diesel Creek wasn't just a name anymore. It was a place, a real physical spot on the map where machines came to be reborn. And with that land came something bigger. Vision. He didn't want a showroom. He wanted a graveyard of machines waiting to be revived. Bulldozers, dump trucks, road graders the size of cabins. Some projects were ridiculous. Others were deeply personal. And some were probably both. But every machine dragged onto that lot was part of something larger, his story. And then just when things looked stable, came the unexpected. Because YouTube isn't a straight path. It's a series of ups and downs, of viral hits and quiet weeks. And every creator learns, usually the hard way, that the algorithm can turn on you. One week you're a sensation, next you're a ghost. Views tank, revenue dips, panic sets in. Matt didn't panic, he doubled down. More builds, more welds, more hours under the sun and snow, fixing what others had abandoned. But the stress was real. The weight of expectations, both from fans and from himself, started pressing in.
Right down in the basement, so they draw quite a bit of power. All right, you guys ready? Moment of truth. Contact. Come on, man.
People weren't just watching. They were depending on him to deliver, to entertain, to inspire. And somewhere in all that grind, something started to shift again. Because what no one tells you is that the spotlight gets heavy. It drains you. And when you're juggling multiple machines, business demands, sponsorships, video deadlines, and personal life all at once, something's going to give. Matt didn't quit, but something changed. He got quieter, not less active, just more focused. He stopped chasing viral moments and went back to the roots. Machines, work, results. Not everything had to be filmed. Not every moment had to be content. He picked up the wrench more and the camera less. And for a while, things settled. The builds kept coming, the audience stayed loyal, and Diesel Creek, once just a rough side project, stood tall as one of the most respected names in the world of DIY heavy equipment. Not because it was flashy, but because it was real. The land was changing, and so was the work, the land that turned rust into purpose. Matt Stetar didn't build Diesel Creek in a vacuum. He built it on memory, repetition, and the kind of brutal discipline that only comes from working with things that can crush you if you're not paying attention. His background wasn't polished. It was shaped by frozen mornings, late invoices, and jobs that didn't come with instructions. And somewhere in that chaos, he found rhythm. By now, the name Diesel Creek didn't just mean a YouTube channel. It was a brand, a place, a symbol. People ordered stickers and shirts. They drove hours just to say hi when he rolled into a local event. They sent him messages, emails, stories. For some, Diesel Creek wasn't just entertainment, it was therapy. Proof that hard work still meant something. Proof that real effort, real sweat could still build something from nothing. But that kind of weight changes things. The pressure grew as the projects got bigger. What started as a guy reviving old equipment turned into a full-on operation. Excavators, dozers, cranes, machines that weighed tens of thousands of pounds and could cost a fortune just to tow. And Matt didn't have a full crew or a fancy shop. He had what he always had: grit, resourcefulness, and the kind of stubborn pride that refuses to outsource anything. He built a sawmill, not a kit, not a prefab setup. He built it from scratch, welded the frame, cut the steel, wired it up, and then he filmed it. Every cut, every mistake, every correction. The audience loved it because it wasn't perfect. That sawmill creaked, moaned, and shook its way to life. And by the end of the build, it wasn't just a tool. It was a symbol of what Diesel Creek stood for: function over form, power over polish. But the sawmill was only the beginning. Soon the land was cluttered with machines, some running, some waiting, all with a story.
Hey everybody, Welcome back to Diesel Creek. My name's Matt. You guys will no doubt remember this beautiful GMC Brigadier that I drug home a few weeks ago.
There was the crawler loader rescued from a swamp, the broken grader that came back from the dead, the dump truck that hadn't moved in over a decade. And Matt didn't just fix them, he told their stories. Every video was part restoration, part documentary, and part philosophy. What looked like simple machinery was actually about something deeper, persistence. But even as the builds got better and the channel grew, so did the noise. Critics showed up, always do. Some claimed the restorations weren't real. Others said he staged problems. A few even questioned his skills. It comes with the territory, especially online. But Matt didn't argue. He didn't respond. He just filmed the next job. Let the results speak. Still, it wore him down, because it wasn't just about proving strangers wrong. It was about not letting fans down, not letting himself down. And that's the dangerous thing about building a brand on your own shoulders. If you fall, the whole thing wobbles. So Matt shifted again. He stopped chasing every project. He got selective, focused, not because the ideas were drying up. He had more than ever, but because he needed to protect what he'd built. Diesel Creek wasn't just a hustle anymore. It was a legacy, and that meant keeping the standard high. He started revisiting old machines, not out of nostalgia, but out of duty. There was a crane that had worked once, barely. Now it needed more than just fuel. It needed surgery, and he gave it exactly that. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt, he tore it down and built it back. Not with fanfare, not with sponsors breathing down his neck. Just him, the tools, and the job. That build hit different, because by then people weren't just watching for repairs. They were watching for meaning, for connection, for that feeling that if this guy can take something rotted and wrecked and make it whole again, maybe their life wasn't too far gone either. Maybe they could fix what they'd left behind. But even cymbals break. The camera caught Matt quieter than usual. The jokes are slower. The eyes are tired. Not burned out, just weathered. He wasn't acting. He was showing up. And that mattered more than any flashy intro or viral moment. And then something big happened. He lost a machine.
No, they still look like they're pretty stuck in there. Doesn't look like a whole lot's happened yet, unfortunately. But I do want to start getting this thing back together, so hopefully today.
Not just any machine, a project he'd invested in. Time, money, emotion, a rig he believed in. 1 minute it was working, the next it was fried. A part failed, and with it, something in him cracked. He didn't rage, he didn't hide. He showed it. Every gritty detail, every curse muttered under his breath, every sigh. People didn't turn away, they leaned in. That's when it became clear. Diesel Creek wasn't just about success. It was about struggle. It was about the attempt, and that meant showing the hits as well as the wins. In response, Matt made one of his boldest moves yet, a project so large, so absurd that most people told him not to do it. A long-abandoned piece of military surplus, rotted through, seized, more rust than steel. It had sat for over 20 years in a junk lot. Most scrappers wouldn't even bid on it. Matt bought it. Why? Because it mattered. Because he wanted to prove that even the worst-case machines could be saved. That there's no such thing as too far gone. Not in equipment, not in life. The prep was insane. The logistics were a nightmare. But slowly, painfully, the pieces came together, one bolt at a time. That's what Diesel Creek had become. Not a tutorial, not entertainment, but proof of concept for something deeper. That time, sweat, and grit still beat excuses. That effort was still currency. That work mattered, even if no one believed in the outcome but you. And while the machine roared back to life, something else shifted too. People who'd never turned a wrench in their life started tuning in. They didn't care about hydraulics or gear ratios. They cared about the process, about the man behind the welder, about what it meant to take something broken and make it breathe again. The work was growing, and so were the people watching. The legacy buried under dirt and diesel. The land he'd bought, once a quiet place to tinker, had become an evolving ecosystem. Every corner of that property told a story. Scrap piles, sawdust mounds, busted steel beams half buried in mud. You couldn't walk 10 feet without stepping on the bones of another project. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't organized. But it was alive. And Matt, he was everywhere. One day running pipe, the next day welding a loader, the next clearing brush to make space for the next ridiculous idea. There were no cameramen, no editors, no film crew. Just one guy who decided that if a job needed doing, it was going to get done. Even if it took twice as long, even if no one saw it. But people saw it, more and more. Some came for the machines, others came for the stories. But everyone stayed for the attitude. That calm, relentless drive. That willingness to look at something ancient and abandoned and say, let's give it one more shot. That kind of hope is contagious. And it spread. He started getting messages from veterans, from retired mechanics, from teenagers with no tools but big dreams. They didn't just want to thank him. They wanted to do it too. They wanted to save something. And for many of them, Matt's rust-covered rebuilds were the spark. Not just to work, but to believe again. And that's when Diesel Creek stopped being just about Matt. It became about who was watching. So he started sharing more. Not just the builds, but the mistakes. He showed the busted threads, the broken tools, the jobs that spiraled into chaos. No filters, no fake drama.
Currently, I'm in the process of doing a bit of refurbishment on this truck. I'm going to be building a higher horsepower engine for it, and she's going to be getting a nice bit of a paint job and some upgrades in some certain areas.
Just what happens when steel fights back and you don't back down. But the real shift came when the community started answering back. People began mailing in parts, old manuals, even broken tools, just in case they could be resurrected. Some sent letters. One guy sent a wrench his grandfather had used in the Second World War. Thought you'd do something better with it than letting it rot in my drawer. That wrench went straight onto a workbench, not as a prop, but as a tool. And yet, behind all that growth, Matt stayed the same. And then, as if nothing had changed, he dropped a video. Another machine, another project. No grand return, no announcement. Just the work as always. And that's what hit hardest. Because Diesel Creek was never about the spotlight. It was about work. And people respected that. They respected the silence. They respected the grind. And when Matt came back, they didn't just watch. They showed up in force. Views surged, comments poured in. Not from strangers, but from a community that had been holding its breath, waiting for a man they'd never met but felt like they knew. And he didn't let them down. The next build was a monster. A piece of mining equipment so corroded it looked like it had been pulled from the bottom of the ocean. It had no paint, no compression, and barely a chassis to speak of. But Matt saw something. A whisper of function inside the wreck. So he tore it apart. Not for views, not for clicks, but because that's what he does. And when it roared back to life weeks later, puffing, smoke, and shaking the earth, the internet erupted. Not because it was a perfect restoration, but because it was real. That build led to the next, and the next. Each one is harder. Each one is more ridiculous. One involved a rescue mission through an abandoned logging trail, just to reach a truck that hadn't moved since before smartphones existed. Another saw him rebuild a massive loader with nothing but a chain hoist, a torch, and whatever parts he could scrape together from 6 counties. But it wasn't about showing off. It was about showing up. Because for Matt, every machine was a metaphor. Every bolt turned was a small act of rebellion against throwaway culture. He didn't just fix things. He proved that things still could be fixed. That failure isn't the end. It's just the start of my next job. And that's why people kept watching. Because in a world that keeps telling you to give up, Diesel Creek says, try one more time. The channel grew, the name spread, but Matt never let it change the core. He stayed behind the camera as much as in front of it. He didn't chase attention, he chased results.
All right, guys, we have got the 71 F250 back to the shop here. Could not have asked for that to go any better. We still have brakes, even all the way home here, pulled into the shop, no leaks, knock on wood.
He started mentoring quietly, answering messages from young mechanics, giving advice, recommending tools, tricks, mindsets. Not because he had to, but because someone once did that for him. And that cycle matters. Diesel Creek became more than Matt. It became an ecosystem, a rhythm, a reminder. And then came the big surprise, a collaboration, quiet, simple, not hyped, but powerful. A joint project with another builder who shared his ethos. Real work, real tools, no drama. They tackled a recovery that should have required a full crew, a crane, and a safety officer. They used an old pickup, a chain, and blind determination. It worked. Barely. Beautifully. And the internet lost it. Because watching two guys figure it out in real time, that was magic. Not the flashy kind. The real kind. The kind you remember. And that's when Matt did something unexpected. He built something new. Not a garage, not a workshop, but a bench. Just a bench at the edge of his property. It wasn't labeled, wasn't shown off. Just a flat slab of wood and steel with a view of his equipment yard. Quiet, simple, like everything else he did. Sometimes he films from there. Sometimes he just sits. Because Diesel Creek isn't about output anymore. It's about outlook. It's about knowing that what you're building isn't just steel and rubber. It's perspective. What if the rust, the noise, and the struggle were never the obstacle, but the point all along? Tell us what you think in the comments, like, and subscribe for more.